The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of fine silverware filled the luxurious ambience of La Vie, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Los Angeles. The place was known for its exclusivity, where the wealthy and elite gathered to discuss million-dollar deals over candlelit tables. A live pianist played a gentle melody in the background, adding to the restaurant's grandeur. Seated in a discreet corner, dressed in a crisp black suit, was Tom Cruise. Despite his international fame, he had always valued his privacy in moments like these. He wasn't here for a public appearance or a flashy event, he was just grabbing a quiet dinner after a long day. His presence, however, did not go unnoticed. A few patrons stole glances in his direction, whispering among themselves, but Tom remained unfazed. He was used to it. Fame had been both a gift and a burden, one that he had learned to carry with grace. Tonight, however, something else held his attention. Across the restaurant, at the far end near the performance stage, a young woman in her early 20s stood nervously beside the piano. She was dressed in simple, worn-out jeans and a plain white blouse, starkly contrasting with the restaurant's luxurious clientele. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, her expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. The maitre d', a well-groomed man with a thin mustache, looked at her with clear disapproval. "Miss, we do not allow uninvited performances here. This is a fine dining establishment, not a street corner." His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the quiet elegance of the restaurant, it carried enough weight to humiliate. The girl took a deep breath. "Please, sir. Just one song. That's all I ask. I need to do this." The man scoffed, already waving for security, but before he could finish his command, a gruff voice interrupted from one of the nearby tables. "Let her sing." All heads turned. The voice belonged to an older gentleman with graying hair and a kind but tired face, a waiter in his mid-60s, wearing a neatly pressed uniform. Despite his composed demeanor, there was an unmistakable sadness in his eyes. "Sir, we can't just," the old man shook his head. "Please. Just one song. It won't take more than a few minutes." His voice was polite but firm, his gaze pleading. Tom watched the scene unfold, curiosity flickering in his sharp blue eyes. There was something about the girl, something beyond her desperate insistence. He had seen that look before in people who had nothing left to lose. After a long, tense pause, the maitre d' exhaled sharply and relented. "Fine. One song. But if the guests complain, she's out." The girl nodded, swallowing hard. Then, she stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone with slightly trembling hands. Tom leaned forward in his seat, intrigued. The girl cleared her throat, took one last deep breath, and then, she began to sing. And the entire restaurant fell silent. The moment the first note escaped her lips, the entire restaurant seemed to freeze. The gentle murmur of conversation halted, the clinking of silverware against fine china ceased, and even the waitstaff momentarily paused in their movements. Her voice, soft yet powerful, carried a haunting depth of emotion that sent chills down the spines of those listening. It wasn't just the melody, it was the way she sang it, as though every lyric carried a weight only she could bear. Tom Cruise felt a chill run down his arms. She wasn't just good. She was extraordinary. Yet, beneath the breathtaking beauty of her voice, he sensed something else, pain. A quiet desperation that bled through every note, wrapped in a sincerity that no studio-trained artist could fake. At the corner of the room, the old waiter, her grandfather, stood still, his hands clenched together. His eyes glistened as he watched her, as though this moment was both his greatest pride and his deepest sorrow. Tom's gaze flickered back to the girl, taking in the small details he had missed before. Her blouse, though clean, was slightly wrinkled, as if she had worn it too many times. The faint shadows beneath her eyes suggested exhaustion. And the way she clung to the microphone, as if this performance was her last chance at something, made his chest tighten. Then he noticed something else, the manager, standing near the back, arms crossed, unimpressed. His fingers drummed against his arm, his expression one of impatience rather than appreciation. As the final note of her song lingered in the air, the restaurant remained in stunned silence. And then, applause. It started slow, hesitant, as though the audience was unsure if it was appropriate to clap in such an exclusive venue. But then it grew, swelling into a standing ovation. Patrons who had moments ago ignored her existence now cheered, some even whistling in admiration. But before the girl could fully take in the moment, the manager stepped forward. "That's enough," he said sharply, the claps quickly dying down. "You got your song, now it's time to leave." She flinched, as if she had expected this. "Wait," Tom's voice cut through the tension, making the manager halt mid-step. All eyes turned to him. He stood up slowly, his expression unreadable, but his gaze fixed firmly on the girl. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated before answering. "Emma," she said softly. Tom nodded, as if committing it to memory. "Why did you need to sing here tonight, Emma?" Her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone stand. She bit her lip, looking at her grandfather before answering. "My grandpa needs surgery. I thought maybe someone here could help. I don't have the money, but I have my voice." A few murmurs spread through the room. The realization settled in, the raw emotion in her song had come from a place of real struggle. Tom exhaled slowly, eyes flickering between Emma and her grandfather. He had seen talent before. But this was something different. And he wasn't about to let her walk away empty-handed. A heavy silence hung in the air after Emma's confession. The restaurant, once filled with casual conversations and laughter, now felt different, charged with unspoken emotion. Patrons exchanged glances, some looking down at their plates, others pretending they hadn't just witnessed something deeply personal. The manager, however, was unmoved. He folded his arms, his lips pressed into a tight line. "Look, kid, I get it, but this is a business. We don't do charity performances here." Emma swallowed hard, her knuckles white around the microphone stand. She had expected rejection, but hearing it out loud, in front of so many people, still stung. Her grandfather, standing at the back, lowered his head. He had worked at La Vie for nearly 20 years, serving the city's wealthiest, never once asking for a favor. And now, when his granddaughter had given them something truly beautiful, they were being dismissed like beggars. Tom's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of arrogance before, people in power pretending to care while ignoring the struggles of those who worked for them. "How much do you need?" Tom's voice cut through the tension, his question directed at Emma. She looked at him, startled. What?" "For your grandfather's surgery." "How much does it cost?" Emma hesitated. This wasn't why she had come. She had hoped to be discovered, not pitted. But as she looked into Tom's eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected, genuine concern. 30,000, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Some guests gasped, a few shaking their heads. That was no small amount. Tom nodded, considering. Before he could speak, the manager scoffed. "Mr. Cruz, with all due respect, this isn't your problem." Tom turned to him, his gaze calm but unwavering. "Maybe it should be." The manager shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the attention on him. "She came in here uninvited, interrupted a fine dining experience, and now expects, what? A handout?" Emma's eyes burned. "I never asked for money. I just wanted a chance to be heard." The room fell silent again. Tom studied Emma for a long moment. Then, instead of pulling out his wallet, he did something unexpected. He reached for a napkin and scribbled something down. "I'll give you something better than money," he said, handing her the note. Emma took it hesitantly, reading the words, "Studio address, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Be there. TC." Her breath caught. Tom Cruise, one of the biggest stars in the world, was giving her an opportunity. But before the moment could fully sink in, a voice cut through the air like a knife. "She's a fraud." The words came from a woman sitting near the center of the room, dressed in a designer gown, her fingers elegantly curled around a wine glass. Angela Carter, a well-known entertainment journalist, leaned back in her chair, studying Emma with a smirk. This whole act, the tears, the tragic backstory. You're hoping someone will feel bad enough to throw you a deal, aren't you? A few murmurs rose among the crowd. Some nodded subtly, their skepticism growing. Emma's face burned with humiliation. That's not true, she said, her voice shaking. Angela chuckled, swirling her wine. I've seen it before. Poor girl, big dreams, plays the sympathy card. And now you've got Tom Cruise, of all people, wrapped around your finger. Impressive. Emma's hands clenched into fists. You don't know anything about me. Angela smirked. I know enough. And if you really had talent, sweetheart, you wouldn't have to beg in a restaurant. Tom stood abruptly, his patience officially gone. Enough. Angela raised an eyebrow. Oh? Struck a nerve? Tom turned to Emma. I don't know what you've been through, but I know what I just heard. And that was real talent. His gaze flickered to Angela. And I also know the difference between a critic and a parasite. A few guests stifled chuckles. Angela's expression darkened. Tom turned back to Emma. The offer stands. Be at the studio tomorrow. Emma's heart pounded. This was her chance, the chance. But deep down, she knew this was far from over. Because Angela Carter was right about one thing, some people would rather tear you down than believe in you. And something told her that this journalist wasn't done with her yet. Emma clutched the napkin in her trembling hands, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. A part of her wanted to believe that this was it, that her life was about to change. But the bitter sting of Angela Carter's words lingered in the air, poisoning her excitement. She could still feel the judgmental gazes of some guests, the doubt flickering in their eyes. People loved an underdog story, but they also loved a scandal. If Angela decided to twist the truth, Emma's reputation could be destroyed before it even began. Her grandfather shuffled to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held pride. You did well, sweetheart, he murmured. Emma swallowed hard, forcing a small smile. Thanks, Grandpa. Tom, who had been watching the exchange, gave her an encouraging nod. Don't let them get to you. You have something special, and tomorrow, you're going to prove it. She nodded, but deep down, anxiety churned in her stomach. But not everyone was willing to wait until tomorrow to bring her down. The press smells a story. Angela Carter's fingers flew across her phone screen as she composed a cryptic tweet. Another Cinderella story? Or just another fraud? You decide. Big names aren't always right about talent. Hashtag Hollywood tricks. Within minutes, the tweet gained traction. Her followers, many of whom thrived on industry gossip, began speculating. Who was she talking about? Was this about Tom Cruise? Did he just get scammed? As Emma and her grandfather left the restaurant that night, photographers were waiting. The flashbulbs exploded in her face, disorienting her. Voices overlapped as questions were hurled in her direction. Emma! Are you really broke, or is this a stunt? Did Tom Cruise promise you a deal? Some say you planned this whole thing. What do you have to say? Her heart pounded. She had never experienced anything like this. The crowd was suffocating, their cameras invasive. Tom, who had been a few steps behind, immediately stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and the press. His voice was calm but firm. That's enough. She's not answering anything tonight. The journalists hesitated. After all, Tom Cruise wasn't someone they could just push around. But that didn't mean they'd back down completely. Angela's tweet had ignited a storm, and by morning, Emma's name would be all over the internet. Doubt creeps in. That night, Emma lay awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. She should have been excited. She had been given an opportunity most people only dreamed of. But instead, she felt terrified. What if Angela was right? What if she got to the studio tomorrow and failed? What if Tom regretted his offer? Her grandfather, sensing her turmoil, sat beside her. You're scared, he said simply. Emma let out a shaky laugh. Is it that obvious? He chuckled softly, then grew serious. Fear is normal. But don't let someone else's doubt make you doubt yourself. She swallowed hard, nodding. She wanted to believe in herself. But tomorrow, she wouldn't just be proving herself to Tom Cruise. She'd be proving herself to the whole world. Angela Carter's next move. Meanwhile, Angela Carter wasn't done. She had built her career by tearing people apart before they ever had the chance to rise. And this girl? She was an easy target. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. I need everything you can find on Emma Lawson, she said smoothly. Where she's from, her past, anything that could make this interesting. A pause. Then the voice on the other end responded. You're going to like this. Turns out, she's been turned away from multiple auditions. No agency would sign her. They all said the same thing, she wasn't good enough. Angela smirked. Now that's a headline. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, and within moments, she had drafted the perfect hit piece. Tom Cruise's discovered talent has a history of rejection. Is she really worth the hype? With one click, Emma's battle just got a lot harder. The morning sun barely peeked through the curtains when Emma's phone began to vibrate relentlessly. She groggily reached for it, her body still heavy from a sleepless night. But as she glanced at the screen, her stomach dropped. Missed calls, 14 new messages, 27. She tapped on the first message. It was from a friend. Emma, have you seen the news? They're coming for you. Her pulse quickened as she quickly opened Twitter. And there it was. Tom Cruise's discovered talent has a history of rejection. Is she really worth the hype? Emma's heart pounded as she skimmed through the article. It painted her as a desperate, failed artist who had tried for years to break into the industry but had been repeatedly turned away. Agencies, producers, and casting directors, all of them had rejected her. And now, suddenly, Tom Cruise had taken her under his wing? The article didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear: she was a fraud. A girl who got lucky because she played on Tom Cruise's kindness. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the replies. Another industry plant? No thanks. She's been rejected by every agency. Why would Tom Cruise think she's worth it? I knew this was fake from the start. She's just another clout chaser. Watch her disappear in a month. Emma swallowed the lump forming in her throat. This was exactly what she had feared. She had been given an opportunity, and now the world wanted to rip it away from her before she even had a chance to prove herself. A soft knock at her door startled her. She turned to see her grandfather standing there, a worried expression on his face. You saw it, didn't you? He asked quietly. Emma could only nod. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he sat down beside her. I won't pretend to know much about the internet or what people say on it, he began, his voice steady, but I do know one thing: those people don't know your heart. Emma looked at him, her vision blurring with tears. What if they're right? She whispered. Her grandfather placed a gentle hand over hers. Are they? She hesitated. I don't know. You do. His grip tightened slightly. You know who you are, Emma. And you know why you sing. She let out a shaky breath, fighting the emotions building inside her. Then, before she could lose her nerve, she grabbed the napkin with Tom's handwritten address and stood. I have to go, she said, voice trembling but determined. Her grandfather smiled, pride shining in his eyes. Then go. And show them why they're wrong. The studio showdown. Emma arrived at the recording studio just before 10 a.m. The moment she stepped inside, she felt small. The walls were lined with platinum records, signed guitars, and framed photographs of legends. People who had shaped the music industry. And then there was her. Just as she was about to second-guess herself, a familiar voice called out. Glad you made it. She turned to see Tom Cruise, standing near the mixing board, arms crossed, a small smile on his face. Emma swallowed her nerves and forced herself to step forward. I I wasn't sure if the offer still stood, she admitted. Tom raised an eyebrow. Why wouldn't it? She hesitated. Because of everything. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. Let me tell you something, Emma. I've been in this industry long enough to know one truth: the louder people doubt you, the bigger the impact you're about to make. She exhaled shakily, nodding. Tom gestured toward the booth. Are you ready? Emma stared at the microphone behind the glass. Everything she had ever wanted was waiting for her on the other side. But she had one shot. One moment to prove them all wrong. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. And the world was about to hear exactly why she belonged here. Inside the recording booth, Emma could hear the faint hum of the studio monitors and the low murmur of Tom and the sound engineers adjusting the settings. The microphone stood in front of her, sleek and powerful, carrying the weight of every artist who had stood here before her. Her heart pounded. She could still hear the whispers from the online attacks, the voices of doubt echoing in her mind. But then, she remembered something stronger, her grandfather's voice, steady and warm. You know who you are, Emma. And you know why you sing. She closed her eyes. And then, she sang. The first note pierced the silence, raw and unshaken. Tom, standing behind the glass, straightened. The sound engineer's hand, which had been reaching for a dial, froze mid-air. There was something about the way she sang, something real. It wasn't just about vocal skill, it was the way she breathed life into the song, pouring her emotions into every note. It was pain, resilience, and hope wrapped in melody. As she hit the chorus, Tom found himself nodding slowly, impressed. She wasn't just good. She was undeniable. When the final note rang through the speakers, silence filled the studio. Emma slowly opened her eyes, her breath shaky. Then, a voice crackled through the intercom. That, Tom said, a smirk playing on his lips, was damn incredible. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The sound engineer turned, nodding in agreement. She's got something special. No auto-tune, no tricks, just pure talent. Tom clapped his hands together. Looks like we have some work to do. Emma's eyes widened. Wait, you mean? He grinned. I meant what I said last night. We're going to record your first track. And when it's ready, we're going to release it. She stared at him, stunned. Just like that? Tom stepped closer to the glass, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Let the world doubt you, he said. Then make them eat their words. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't from sadness. She nodded, her grip tightening on the headphones. She had spent her whole life waiting for a chance. Now, she had one. And she wasn't going to waste it. Emma sat in the studio lounge, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of a paper cup filled with untouched coffee. The last few hours had been a whirlwind, recording session after recording session, with Tom Cruise and a team of sound engineers meticulously fine-tuning her debut track. She should have been exhausted, but adrenaline still thrummed in her veins. She was here. She had just recorded her first professional song. And yet, the outside world was still waiting to tear her apart. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend. You need to see this. The article is spreading like wildfire. Emma inhaled sharply, hesitating before opening her browser. Angela Carter's hit piece was now being reposted everywhere. Music blogs, entertainment channels, even mainstream outlets had picked up the headline, Tom Cruise's new talent discovery has a history of rejection, industry experts weigh in. Comment sections were brutal. If she was actually good, why did every label reject her before? She probably cried her way into this opportunity. Tom is wasting his time. She's not even that special. Emma felt a lump in her throat. Even after all this, after the hardest night of her life, after proving herself in that booth, people still didn't believe in her. A shadow crossed the doorway. Tom. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her carefully. You read it, didn't you?" Emma nodded, gripping her cup tighter. "They're saying I don't deserve this." Tom let out a small laugh, not mocking, but knowing. "Emma, if I listened to every person who told me I didn't belong, I would have quit before I even started." She looked up at him, searching his face. He sat down across from her. "When I was breaking into Hollywood, I wasn't what people expected. Too short, too intense, too ambitious. They thought I was just another kid trying to make it big." His eyes softened. "And now, they call me an icon." Emma swallowed. "But I don't have your legacy. I'm just—" Tom raised a brow. "You're just someone who walked into a restaurant last night, sang one song, and shut down an entire room full of millionaires. That's not just anything, Emma." She exhaled, blinking back the moisture in her eyes. Tom leaned forward. "Here's the thing, no one believes in you until you make them. That's how this industry works." Emma took a deep breath, nodding. "I believe in you," Tom continued, his voice firm. "You wouldn't be here if I didn't. But what matters is, do you believe in yourself?" Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced back at the sound booth, where hours ago, she had sung her heart out. She thought about her grandfather, working long shifts at that restaurant just to keep them afloat. She thought about every rejection letter, every time she had been told not quite good enough. She thought about the moment she picked up that microphone and silenced a room. Emma finally looked back at Tom. "Yes," she said, this time without hesitation. "I do." A slow smile spread across Tom's face. "Good. Then let's make them listen." And with that, everything began to change. Angela Carter's plans backfire as the hours passed. Angela Carter sat in her office, her fingers tapping rhythmically against her desk. She had expected her article to shut down the hype around Emma, to expose her as a talentless nobody who got lucky. But something was off. Her assistant rushed in, holding a tablet. "You need to see this." Angela took the device, eyes narrowing as she skimmed the screen. "Hollywood Insider, Emma Lawson's studio session leaks, and it's blowing people away." She clicked the link. Someone inside the studio, whether intentionally or not, had leaked a short clip of Emma's recording session. It was raw, unedited, but utterly mesmerizing. Her voice soared through the speakers, dripping with emotion, power, and undeniable talent. The article's comments were completely different from before. "Wait, this girl can actually sing. Okay, I take back everything. She's incredible. This gave me chills. When's the full song dropping?" Angela's stomach twisted. The narrative had flipped against her. She had underestimated one simple truth: talent can't be faked. And no matter how much she had tried to spin the story, Emma had proven herself where it mattered most, with her voice. Angela clenched her jaw, realizing she had lost control of the story. And worse? Tom Cruise had just bet on the right person.